The rifle felt heavier than Clara Whitmore remembered. Perhaps it was the bitter Colorado cold creeping into her bones, or perhaps it was the weight of living alone for 3 endless months. Since burying her husband beneath the frozen earth outside Silver Creek Church, every sound beyond the cabin walls had become a warning. A violent blizzard raged across the plains, driving snow against the tiny cabin until it groaned under the pressure. The wind screamed through the trees like something alive, threatening to bury everything in its path. Clara had survived enough tragedy to recognize danger when it came knocking. And then it did. 3 hard knocks echoed through the cabin. She raised her rifle toward the door, every muscle tense. "Who is it?" she called, refusing to let fear shake her voice. A calm, deep voice answered through the storm. "My name's Silas Maddox. My horse won't survive this weather. I'm only asking for shelter until morning." Clara hesitated. She had learned long ago that a woman alone could not afford to trust strangers. At 16, she had lost both parents to cholera. Soon afterward, relatives had traded her into a miserable marriage with Thomas Whitmore, a man who treated kindness as weakness. Love had never entered her home. In the next room, 12-year-old Jake Hartley coughed in his sleep. The orphan boy had nowhere else to go after his father died in a ranch accident, and Clara had taken him in despite barely having enough food for herself. She glanced toward the hidden sack beneath the cellar floor where Thomas's mysterious $500 remained buried. Whatever secrets her late husband had kept, she wanted no part of them. The knock came again. Finally, Clara unlocked the door, keeping the rifle pointed at the stranger. The man standing outside looked enormous. Snow covered his broad shoulders, and his exhausted horse struggled to remain standing. Yet despite his intimidating size, his gray eyes carried only exhaustion. "You're smaller than I expected," he admitted with the faintest smile. Clara tightened her grip on the rifle. "I'm still big enough to pull this trigger." Silas nodded respectfully. "I believe you." Something about his honesty caught her off guard. "The barn is behind the house," she said firmly. "You'll sleep there. At sunrise, you leave." "Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore." He led his horse toward the barn without another word. Morning arrived beneath deep snowdrifts. Clara bundled herself in heavy clothing and stepped outside to check the livestock. Halfway to the barn, her foot caught beneath the snow, sending her crashing into the frozen ground. The cold swallowed her quickly. Her arms grew numb. Her vision blurred. Then powerful hands lifted her effortlessly. She drifted in and out of consciousness as Silas carried her into the warmth of the barn. When she finally awoke beside a glowing stove, he stood several feet away, careful not to invade her space. "You were freezing," he said quietly. "I only wanted to save your life." Before Clara could answer, Jake burst into the barn. His frightened eyes moved between them before settling on the giant stranger. "Are you a bad man?" the boy asked. Silas slowly knelt until they were eye level. "I used to make bad choices," he answered honestly. "Now I'm trying to become a better man." Jake simply nodded. "My ma says everyone deserves one chance." For the first time in years, Clara found herself lowering every defense she had built around her heart. "Breakfast is in an hour," she said softly. "You can join us." Silas smiled with quiet gratitude, and neither of them realized that the storm had brought far more than a stranger to her lonely ranch. It had delivered the first spark of hope either of them had felt in years. Silas Maddox had intended to leave as soon as the roads became passable. That had been his plan from the moment Clara allowed him to shelter in her barn. But the blizzard lingered for days, and every sunrise gave him another reason to stay. Each morning, Clara awoke to the sound of an axe striking wood or a hammer repairing something that had been broken for years. Without asking for payment, Silas mended the leaking roof, rebuilt sections of the sagging fence, repaired the barn door, and chopped enough firewood to last through the winter. He worked from dawn until dusk, never expecting praise. Jake followed him everywhere. The 12-year-old watched eagerly as Silas showed him how to approach nervous horses, split firewood safely, and repair broken tools. Silas never lost his patience, even when Jake made mistakes. Instead, he encouraged the boy to keep trying until he succeeded. Watching them together stirred emotions Clara had buried long ago. She had never seen strength used with such gentleness. Thomas had believed power came from fear. Silas seemed to believe it came from kindness. One afternoon, Maggie O'Brien arrived from Silver Creek with a wagon of supplies. She immediately noticed the tall stranger repairing Clara's roof. "So," Maggie teased with a knowing smile, "looks like you found yourself a hard-working guest." "He's only staying until the road's clear," Clara replied quickly. Maggie laughed. "Sometimes the best things arrive when they're not invited." Her words lingered in Clara's thoughts long after Maggie departed. That evening, the three of them shared a simple supper beside the fire. Jake filled the room with stories while Silas quietly listened, smiling more than speaking. After the boy went to bed, silence settled between Clara and Silas. Finally, Silas looked into the flames. "You should know something about me," he said. Clara waited. "I've done things I'm not proud of. People have hunted me for years. You don't seem like the man they're hunting." He gave a tired smile. "People aren't always who they seem." Before Clara could ask more, a black carriage rolled into the yard the following morning. Harlan Crane stepped out wearing expensive clothes untouched by dust or snow. Two armed men stood behind him. "My condolences, Mrs. Whitmore," he said with false sympathy. "I'm here about your late husband's debt." Clara frowned. "My husband never mentioned any debt." Crane produced several documents and calmly explained that Thomas owed him $500 plus interest. If she failed to repay him, the ranch, including its valuable water rights, would become his property. Silas quietly stepped beside Clara. "The lady said no," he said firmly. Crane studied the towering stranger before forcing a smile. "This matter doesn't concern you." "It does when you threaten a widow." For a long moment, neither man moved. Finally, Crane climbed back into his carriage. "I'll return soon," he warned before disappearing down the snowy road. That night, Clara searched through Thomas's hidden belongings and discovered a sealed envelope tucked beside the money. Inside were letters proving her late husband had secretly worked with Crane in illegal gun-running operations. The truth left her shaken. Before she could decide what to do, another visitor arrived the next morning. A bounty hunter rode into the yard holding a weathered wanted poster. "I'm looking for Silas Maddox," he announced. "There's a $200 reward for the man standing beside you." The ranch fell silent. Clara slowly turned toward Silas. Instead of denying it, he met her eyes with quiet honesty. "Everything on that poster began with one terrible night," he said. "And I think it's finally time you heard the whole truth." Silas lowered his eyes before speaking. "Years ago, I worked for men who cared more about money than innocent lives. One night they ordered us to burn down a homestead because the family refused to sell their land. There were children inside. I refused." He paused, his voice heavy with regret. "They shot first. I fought back to save those people. When it was over, one man was dead, and I became the outlaw everyone blamed." The bounty hunter listened quietly before lowering the wanted poster. "You've got 48 hours, he warned. After that, duty is duty." As he rode away, Clara looked into Silas's weary eyes. "I believe you," she said softly. The simple words meant more than forgiveness. They gave Silas something he had not felt in years, hope. But peace did not last. The next morning, Clara discovered another letter hidden among Thomas's papers. It revealed that Harlan Crane's criminal dealings stretched far beyond gun-running. Determined to protect Jake and the ranch, she decided to confront Crane herself. Without telling Silas, she rode into town. It was a mistake. Crane had expected her. Inside his warehouse, armed men surrounded Clara before she could escape. Crane smiled as he locked the doors behind her. "I offered you a fair bargain," he sneered. "Now I'll simply take what's mine." Back at the ranch, Silas found the note Clara had left behind. His heart sank. Without wasting another second, he saddled his horse and rode toward town with Sheriff Burke and several deputies close behind. Gunfire shattered the quiet streets of Silver Creek as Crane's men opened fire from inside the warehouse. Bullets splintered wooden beams while townspeople rushed for cover. Silas charged through a side entrance, using every lesson his dangerous past had taught him. He fought only to protect, never to kill. One by one, Crane's hired men surrendered. Inside the office, Crane held Clara at gunpoint. "You should have sold me the ranch," he hissed. Before he could pull the trigger, Silas burst through the doorway. "Let her go." Crane fired. Silas tackled Clara to safety as Sheriff Burke entered from behind. Moments later, Crane was disarmed and placed under arrest. The letters Clara had discovered exposed every one of Crane's crimes. More importantly, witnesses finally confirmed Silas's version of the old shooting. The governor withdrew the bounty, and for the first time in years, Silas became a free man. Spring arrived, replacing snow with green fields and clear skies. One evening, Silas stood beneath the old oak tree outside the cabin, nervously turning a simple gold ring between his fingers. "I've spent years running from my past," he said. "But with you and Jake, I've found something worth staying for." He knelt on one knee. "Clara Whitmore, will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she smiled. "Yes." Jake burst out of the cabin laughing. "Does this mean I finally get a pa?" Silas smiled and pulled the boy into a warm embrace. "If you'll have me." Their wedding was small but joyful. Friends from Silver Creek filled the little church, celebrating not just a marriage but a new beginning. Together, Clara, Silas, and Jake rebuilt the ranch into a thriving home filled with laughter instead of fear. Years later, another storm gathered on the horizon. Standing together on the porch, Clara slipped her hand into Silas's. The wind still howled across the Colorado plains, but it no longer frightened them. Because home was no longer just a place. It was the family they had chosen, the promises they had kept, and the love that had carried them safely through every storm.